Hello and welcome back to the podcast. Jenny here, ready to explore some tech frontiers.
And Mark here. Speaking of frontiers, Jenny, I was just digging into some updates from the University of Buffalo and, well, it's pretty interesting stuff happening up there.
Oh yeah? UTB? Don't keep me in suspense, Mark. What have they cooked up now? Last I heard they were doing cool things with materials science.
Still are, I'm sure. But this ties into that huge New York State initiative, Empire AI. Remember we touched on that? The big $400 million investment aimed at boosting AI development across the state?
Right, yeah, the one trying to make sure advanced computing isn't just locked away inside giant tech companies, kind of democratizing the supercomputers, spreading the resources around.
Exactly. And UTMB is positioned as a major hub for this. Get this, they have over 200 times faculty involved already. They're spearheading projects aimed squarely at healthcare and, what they're calling the public good.
Okay, AI for the public good. I like the sound of that, definitely more reassuring than AI for maximum profit. But it's a broad term. What kind of projects are we actually talking about? Give me some specifics.
All right, settle in. It's a wide spectrum. They're working on improving communication for people with ALS, making medical scans potentially more accurate, assisting with mental health challenges, trying to speed up drug discovery. Oh, and even refining speech therapy techniques for kids. It's ambitious.
Wow, okay, that times a hefty list. Let's maybe unpack those a bit. The ALS communication part sounds particularly important. How exactly is AI supposed to help there? Seems like a really tough challenge.
It is, but this is where it gets really interesting. A researcher there, Rohini Srihari, is developing personalized large language models, LLMs, specifically for individuals with ALS who use communication devices, AAC devices.
Personalized LLMs. Okay, so we're not just talking about the standard predictive text you get on your phone, like guessing the next word?
Way beyond that. Imagine an AI assistant that's been trained, or rather fine-tuned, on your time specific way of communicating. It learns your vocabulary, your common phrases, your sentence structures, even the typical context of your conversations, all pulled from how you actually use your AAC device.
So it's like having a scribe who knows you really well, anticipating what you might want to say much more accurately and quickly because it's learned times your patterns, not just general language patterns?
Precisely. The goal is to drastically reduce the cognitive load and the time it takes for someone with ALS to construct messages. Think about how frustrating that delay must be. Their early results suggest it could cut down response generation times significantly compared to older, more static systems.
That could be, genuinely helpful for daily life. Reducing that friction in communication when it's already so difficult, that's a tangible benefit. But, it also makes me wonder, does relying heavily on an I like that risk reducing the human element? Or maybe create new kinds of frustrations if the AI times guesses wrong too often?
That's a fair point, and something developers in this space have to consider. The aim isn't to replace the person's intent, but to make expressing it easier. It's a tool, right? And like any tool, it needs to be designed carefully. The personalization is key, making it feel like times your times tool, not just times an asterisk AI, but yes. The human factor, the user experience, has to be central.
Okay. Let's shift gears to the medical imaging. You mentioned making scans more accurate. How does AI play a role there? Are we talking about AI reading the scans instead of radiologists?
Not necessarily replacing radiologists, but potentially augmenting their abilities. One approach they're exploring involves something called Generative Adversarial Networks, or GANs. Have you seen those creepy AI-generated faces online that look almost real?
Yeah, those "this person does not exist" things? Or AI creating artwork? Okay, how does generating fake faces connect to, say, an MRI scan?
It's the underlying tech. Think of it like two AIs in a constant competition. One AI, the generator, tries to create synthetic medical images, fake MRIs, for example. The other AI, the discriminator, tries to tell if the image it's seeing is a real scan or one of the fakes. They push each other to get better and better.
Okay, I follow the competition idea. But why create times synthetic times medical images? Don't doctors need the real times ones for diagnoses?
Great question. There are a couple of key reasons. First, these GANs can sometimes learn to generate images with enhanced clarity, or potentially highlight subtle features that might be hard to spot in the original scan. Think of it like an AI-powered contrast boost, maybe? Helping radiologists focus their attention.
So, potentially highlighting anomalies?
Potentially. But the second reason is really important for training other AIs. For rare diseases, you often don't have thousands of patient scans needed to properly train an AI model to recognize that disease. GANs can create lots of realistic synthetic data, fake scans showing the rare condition, to fill that data gap for training purposes.
Ah, okay. So you use the synthetic data to teach different asterisk AI how to spot the real thing, especially if the real thing is uncommon? That makes sense. But then, how do you ensure the synthetic data is accurate? And what about bias? If the real-time data used to train the GANs reflects existing biases, won't the AI just learn and maybe even amplify those?
That's the million-dollar question, Jenny, and a huge focus in AI ethics. Ensuring fairness and avoiding bias amplification is critical, especially in healthcare. The researchers mentioned using an architecture called StyleGAN 3, known for high-fidelity images. But validating the clinical usefulness and fairness of the synthetic data is a whole other challenge. It requires careful testing and oversight.
Definitely something to keep a close eye on. You also mentioned this links to protein folding. That sounds complex. How does that tie in?
Right, so there's related work on predicting protein structures. You might remember AlphaFold making waves. UEMB has projects like WXSFold, which aims to improve these predictions by factoring in environmental conditions like pH or temperature. Proteins don't exist in a vacuum, right? Their environment affects their shape, and their shape dictates their function, or malfunction, in disease.
Understanding how proteins fold and interact. That sounds like it leads directly into the drug discovery part you mentioned earlier.
You got it. It all connects. Another UB researcher, Ram Samudrala, developed a platform called CANDO, Computational Analysis of Novel Drugs and Omics Data. The omics part refers to analyzing vast data sets about genes, proteins, metabolites. Basically, the molecular landscape of biology.
Okay, so CANDO takes all that omics data and does what with it?
It acts like a massive matchmaking system. It sifts through huge databases of existing drugs and other chemical compounds and predicts how they might interact with different biological targets, like those proteins we were just talking about. It simulates billions of potential interactions.
So instead of painstakingly testing thousands of compounds one by one in a wet lab, the AI does a massive virtual screening first to find the most promising candidates for a specific disease target, like finding a needle in a haystack, but with algorithms?
Exactly. It significantly narrows down the field for lab testing. The research suggested it could potentially reduce the costs tied to asterisk preclinical times trials by something like 40%. Considering how incredibly slow and expensive drug development is, that's a substantial improvement.
40%? Yeah, that would make a difference. Does CANDO only work for human medicines, or could it be used for other things?
That's another neat aspect. Because it's fundamentally about predicting molecular interactions, the same underlying approach could, in theory, be adapted for designing safer pesticides, developing new biosensors, or even formulating new materials. It's quite versatile.
Okay, that's impressive. We've covered communication aids, better scans, faster drug discovery. What about the mental health and speech therapy angles you mentioned? Those feel a bit different.
They are, and they touch on areas where there are often significant workforce shortages. For mental health, the idea isn't about replacing therapists, let's be clear on that, but developing AI-assisted tools.
Tools to do what, exactly? Schedule appointments?
More involved than that, potentially. Maybe helping with initial assessments to gather information, monitoring patient progress between sessions via journaling apps or questionnaires, or even providing guided cognitive behavioral therapy exercises based on the therapist's plan. The goal is to extend the reach and capacity of human mental health professionals.
I see the potential for improving accessibility, maybe reducing wait times. But alarms bells immediately go off for me. Privacy, data security. We're talking about incredibly sensitive information and the risk of bias in the AI's suggestions or assessments. Plus, Can an algorithm truly provide empathy or understand nuance the way a human therapist can? That therapeutic relationship is so important.
You're hitting all the critical points, Jenny. And the researchers involved would likely agree these are paramount concerns. It absolutely has to be developed responsibly, with transparency, robust security, and constant human oversight. It's augmentation, not replacement. But the ethical tightrope is very real. Getting it wrong could do harm.
A very fine tightrope indeed. Definitely one area where move fast and break things is not times the right approach. And the speech therapy part for kids?
Similar principle. Using AI to augment, not replace. They're developing AI systems that can offer real-time feedback during speech exercises. Imagine a child practicing sounds. The AI could analyze their pronunciation and provide immediate, encouraging feedback, or subtly adjust the difficulty of the next exercise.
Making practice maybe more engaging, like a game, and more personalized than just repeating lists? I could see that potentially being helpful, especially if it adapts. Could schools use something like this? Maybe to help kids who need a bit of extra support but don't have easy access to a dedicated therapist?
That's precisely the hope. Integrating tools like this into educational settings could provide tailored support to more children, potentially catching issues earlier, or just making therapy more consistent and accessible. But again, the equity question you raised earlier applies. Does every school get this tech? How do we ensure it doesn't widen gaps?
Right. Access remains a huge factor across all of this. So, looking at the big picture, from very specific medical needs like ALS communication, through diagnostics, drug development, and therapies, UB seems to be leveraging this Empire AI funding across a really broad front.
It certainly looks that way. And it circles back to that initial point about democratizing access to high-power computing. Venu Govindaraju, who's UB's vice president for research, essentially said that Empire AI helps level the playing field. It gives academic researchers access to the kind of computational horsepower that, until recently, was mostly the domain of a few giant tech corporations.
Which, in theory, allows for more diverse research questions to be asked. Maybe ones focused more on public benefit or niche problems rather than solely on commercially lucrative applications. It's an interesting model for public investment in R&D.
It is. It aims to position New York, and institutions like UTMB within it, as key players in developing AI thoughtfully and applying it to tangible, real-world problems, especially in health. Of course, the proof will be in the outcomes.
Absolutely. Lots of potential here, but also lots of crucial questions about ethics, equity, and effectiveness that need constant attention. We'll definitely need to keep an eye on how these projects mature and what kind of real-world impact they actually deliver down the line.
For sure. From potentially improving daily life for patients with conditions like ALS to maybe finding new treatments faster. It's certainly worth watching.
All right, well, that's a great, detailed look at some really interesting work happening at UB, powered by Empire AI. Thanks for breaking all that down, Mark, and for tackling the tricky questions, too.
Anytime, Jenny. It's complex stuff, but fascinating to think about the possibilities and the responsibilities.
Couldn't agree more. And thanks to all of you for tuning in. We'll catch you on the next episode.